The principal was still standing at the podium when my grandson's stepmother grabbed the microphone, looked straight at me, and said, "Let's be honest. This boy's real family gave up on him years ago. If it weren't for me, he'd be nothing." 300 people in that auditorium went silent. My grandson, Jaylen, 17 years old, sitting in the front row in his cap and gown, turned to look at me. His eyes were begging me not to cry. My hands were shaking. My chest felt like someone had set a match inside it. But I did not cry. I stood up from my seat in the back row, walked down that center aisle with every eye on me, and said, "Ma'am, I don't know what story you've been telling people, but I know exactly who raised this boy. And I know exactly what you did to make sure I couldn't." Her face changed. The confidence drained out, like someone pulled a plug, because she knew what I meant, and she knew I had proof. But this story did not begin in that auditorium. It began 11 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and grief, when my daughter died. My daughter, Grace, was 31 years old when the cancer took her. She fought it for 2 years. She fought it the way she did everything, quiet and strong, never asking for pity, never letting Jaylen see her afraid. Jaylen was 6 then. He had big round eyes and a gap in his front teeth, and he liked to draw dinosaurs on napkins at the kitchen table. When Grace got too sick to get out of bed, Jaylen would climb up next to her and read to her from his picture books. He would sound out every word slow and careful, and Grace would smile even when I could tell the pain was eating her alive. I was 52 when Grace passed. My husband had been gone 5 years already. Heart attack at work. No warning, just a phone call that changed everything. So it was just me. I was a retired school bus driver, living on Social Security in a small house in Decatur, Georgia. The roof needed fixing. The kitchen faucet dripped. But it was warm and it was ours. Grace's final wish was simple. She held my hand in that hospital bed and whispered, "Mama, take care of my baby. Don't let Marcus take him." Marcus was Jaylen's father. He and Grace were never married. He was around for the first 2 years of Jaylen's life. Then he drifted. Showed up at birthdays sometimes. Sent money once or twice a year. But when Grace got sick, Marcus disappeared completely. Not a phone call. Not a card. Nothing. So when Grace asked me to protect Jaylen, I promised. And I meant it with everything I had. For the first 3 years after Grace passed, life was hard, but it was ours. I stretched every dollar. I learned to cook meals that lasted 3 days. I walked Jaylen to school every morning and picked him up every afternoon. I helped him with math, even though math had never been my strong suit. I sat in the audience at every school play, every science fair, every talent show where he played his little recorder off-key and grinned at me from the stage. Jaylen called me Grandma. But I was his whole world, and he was mine. Some nights, after he fell asleep, I would sit on the edge of his bed and whisper, "Your mama is watching, baby, and she is so proud." Then Marcus came back. Jaylen was 9. Marcus showed up at my front door one Saturday morning in a pressed shirt and clean shoes, looking like a different man. He said he had gotten his life together. He said he had a good job now, an office job at a logistics company in Charlotte, North Carolina. He said he had married a woman named Diane. He said he wanted to be part of Jaylen's life again. I stood in that doorway and looked at this man who had vanished when his son needed him most, and every instinct in my body screamed, "No." But I also knew something. A boy needs to know his father, even a flawed one. And I could not keep Marcus away legally. He had never lost his parental rights because Grace never went to court. She had been too sick to fight that battle. So I agreed to visits. Supervised at first. Marcus would come down to Decatur once a month, take Jaylen to the park, buy him ice cream, and bring him back by 6. Jaylen was cautious at first. He would hold my hand tight before Marcus arrived and whisper, "You'll be here when I get back, right?" And I always said, "I will always be here." But kids are trusting. That is their gift and their weakness. After a few months, Jaylen started looking forward to Marcus's visits. He would draw pictures for his dad. He would tell his friends at school, "My dad is coming this weekend." And my heart cracked a little every time because I could see what was happening. Jaylen was falling in love with the idea of a father, and Marcus was building something I could not compete with, not because he was a better parent, but because he was new. Then one visit, Marcus brought Diane. She was tall, with perfect nails and a smile that never reached her eyes. She brought Jaylen an expensive pair of sneakers. The kind all the kids at school wanted. Jaylen's face lit up. Diane hugged him like she had known him his whole life and said, "I've heard so much about you. I can't wait to be part of your family." I watched from the porch and something in my stomach turned. Not because Diane was unkind on the surface. She was polished, charming, and she said all the right words. But I've spent my whole life reading people. When you drive a school bus for 25 years, you learn to see what kids are really feeling, and you learn to see when adults are performing. Diane was performing. 6 months later, Marcus filed for custody. Full custody. The papers arrived at my door on a Tuesday afternoon, and I sat at my kitchen table and read them 3 times because I could not believe what I was seeing. Marcus claimed I was too old to care for a growing boy. He claimed my house was inadequate. He claimed Jaylen would have better opportunities in Charlotte. He claimed he could provide a stable 2-parent home. I called a lawyer that same day, a woman named Patricia who worked out of a small office on Ponce de Leon Avenue. She was honest with me. She said, "Grandparents' rights cases are hard in Georgia. If the biological father is stable and married, judges tend to lean toward the parent." My blood went cold. I said, "That man did not sit in a hospital for 2 years watching his son's mother die." I did. "That man did not learn how to braid hair at midnight from YouTube videos." I did. "That man did not hold Jaylen when he cried on Mother's Day because he missed Grace." I did. Patricia said, "I know, but the court sees biology first." The custody battle lasted 8 months. I spent every cent of my savings. I sold my car to pay legal fees. I took a part-time job at a laundromat folding other people's clothes so I could keep the lights on and pay Patricia. And in the end, the judge ruled in Marcus's favor. Full custody to the father. I was granted 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in summer. The day they took Jaylen, he stood on my front porch with his little suitcase, and his eyes were red and swollen. He grabbed my dress and said, "Grandma, please don't let them take me, please." I knelt down and held his face in my hands. I said, "Baby, I will never stop fighting for you. You hear me? This is not the end." But it felt like the end. The house was so quiet after he left that I could hear the faucet dripping from every room. For the next 2 years, I drove 4 hours to Charlotte every month for my weekend visits. 4 hours there, 4 hours back. My brother lent me his old truck because I had sold my car. I would arrive at Marcus's house, a big new construction in a subdivision with a gate, and Diane would open the door with that smile that never reached her eyes. At first, things seemed okay. Jaylen had his own room. He was enrolled in a good school. He had new clothes and new toys. But I noticed things. Jaylen talked less. He used to chatter non-stop, telling me about bugs he found and books he read and jokes his friends told. Now he gave short answers. "School's fine." "Yeah, I'm okay." Dinner was good. One visit, when we were alone at a park, I asked him gently, "Baby, are you happy?" He looked at the ground for a long time. Then he said, "Diane doesn't like when I talk about Mama." My heart stopped. He continued, "She says I need to move forward. She took the photo of Mama off my dresser. She said it was making me sad." I kept my voice calm even though inside I was screaming. "What did your daddy say?" Jaylen shrugged. He said Diane knows best. I drove home that night gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I called Patricia. She said unless there was documented abuse or neglect, there was nothing we could do legally. A stepmother removing a photo was not enough. But it got worse. Over the next year, Diane started limiting my visits. She would text me the morning of my scheduled weekend and say Jaylen had a birthday party or a sports tournament, or he was feeling sick. Cancellation after cancellation. When I complained to Marcus, he said, "Diane handles the schedule. Talk to her." When I called Diane, she would say sweetly, "We just want what's best for Jaylen. Maybe next month." In 1 year, my 12 scheduled weekends became 4 actual visits. I documented everything. Every cancelled visit, every text message, every excuse. Patricia said, "Keep a record. If it becomes a pattern, we can go back to court." Then something happened that changed everything. Jaylen was 13. I had not seen him in 3 months because Diane kept cancelling. One night at 11 p.m., my phone rang. It was a number I did not recognize. A woman's voice said, "Is this Jaylen's grandmother?" I said yes. She said, "I'm the school counselor at Eastwood Middle School. Jaylen asked me to call you. He's not in danger right now, but he's been coming to my office a lot. He says he doesn't feel safe talking at home. My hands started trembling. I said, "Safe from what?" The counselor paused. Then she said carefully, "I can't go into details over the phone, but I think you should request a visit soon, and I think you should listen very carefully to what he tells you." I drove to Charlotte the next day. I did not call Diane. I went straight to the school during lunch. When Jaylen saw me in the counselor's office, he broke down. He ran to me and buried his face in my chest and sobbed like the 6-year-old boy who lost his mama. When he calmed down, he told me, Diane controlled everything. She monitored his phone. She read his text messages. She deleted my number from his contacts twice, and both times he memorized it and wrote it inside his shoe. She told him that I was trying to break up their family. She told him that I took him from Marcus when he was little, and that the court had to fix it. She told him his mother was weak, and that weakness was genetic, and that he needed to work twice as hard to prove he was not like her. My hands were shaking so bad I had to press them against my knees. Jaylen said, "She never hits me, Grandma, but she makes me feel like I'm nothing. She tells Dad I'm acting out, so he grounds me. She threw away Mama's necklace, the one you gave me. She said it was junk. Grace's necklace. A thin gold chain with a tiny cross that Grace wore every day of her life. I had given it to Jaylen the day he left my house, and Diane threw it away. I looked at the school counselor. She said, "I've documented several conversations with Jaylen. Emotional abuse is harder to prove, but patterns matter." That day, I called Patricia and said, "We're going back to court." This time, I had evidence. The counselor's notes, Jaylen's own statements, my records of every cancelled visit, text messages from Diane that showed the pattern of isolation. I also learned something new. Patricia had dug deeper into Marcus and Diane's finances and found something that made my stomach turn. Diane had applied for and received state benefits for Jaylen, including an educational assistance grant and a dependent care tax credit. She had listed herself as his primary caregiver and claimed expenses that did not match reality. Jaylen told me he wore the same 3 shirts to school most weeks. He said the expensive clothes Diane bought were for when company came over. The rest of the time, she spent on herself. The court date was set for May. But before it arrived, something else happened. Jaylen's school announced he was graduating middle school as valedictorian. Top of his class. My boy, the one Diane said carried weakness in his genes, had the highest GPA in his entire school. The graduation ceremony was scheduled at the school auditorium. 300 seats. Marcus and Diane would be there, and the school had asked parents and family to speak. I was not invited to speak. Diane had contacted the school and told them she was Jaylen's mother and that she would give the family remarks. She did not mention me at all. I found out because the counselor called me. She said, "I thought you should know. Diane volunteered to speak on behalf of the family. Your name is not on the program." I said, "I will be there." The day of graduation, I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I wore to Grace's funeral. I pinned Grace's photo inside my purse, close to my heart, and I drove 4 hours to Charlotte. When I walked into that auditorium, I saw Jaylen immediately. He was sitting in the front row with his cap and gown, and when he saw me, his whole face changed. Relief. That is what I saw. Pure relief, like he had been holding his breath for months and could finally let it out. I sat in the back row. Marcus and Diane were in the front, on the other side. Diane wore a white dress like she was the star of the show. Marcus sat beside her, quiet as always, a man who had traded his spine for comfort. The ceremony was beautiful. The choir sang. The principal gave a speech. Then it was time for family remarks. Diane stood up, walked to the podium like she owned it, and took the microphone. She started fine. She talked about Jaylen's hard work, his dedication, but then her voice shifted. She looked out at the audience and said, "When Jaylen came into our home, he was lost. He had no direction. He had no structure. His early years were chaotic." She paused and glanced toward the back of the room where I was sitting. "Let's be honest. This boy's real family gave up on him years ago. If it weren't for me, he'd be nothing." The auditorium went dead quiet. I could hear someone's phone buzz 3 rows away. Jaylen's head dropped. His hands gripped the edges of his chair. And I saw Marcus sitting there doing nothing, Just like he did nothing when Grace was dying. Just like he did nothing when Diane erased me from my grandson's life. And something inside me that had been patient for 11 years caught fire. I stood up. I walked down that center aisle. Every step felt deliberate, like the floor was guiding me. People turned to watch. Some whispered. Some lifted their phones. I stopped at the podium. Diane still had the microphone. She looked at me with wide eyes. I said, calm and clear, "Ma'am, I don't know what story you've been telling people, but I know exactly who raised this boy. And I know exactly what you did to make sure I couldn't." Diane's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at his shoes. I turned to the audience. I did not yell. I did not curse. I spoke the way I used to speak to 300 kids on my school bus when they needed to listen. "My name is Ruth Patterson. I am Jaylen's grandmother. His mother, my daughter Grace, died of cancer when Jaylen was 6 years old. I raised him for 3 years after that. I potty trained him, taught him to read, held him when he cried for his mama at night. I raised that boy with everything I had." The room was completely still. His father, Marcus, left when Jaylen was 2. He came back when Jaylen was 9 and took him through the courts. I lost custody not because I was unfit, but because the law favors biology. I have driven 4 hours each way every month for the past 8 years to see my grandson. When I was allowed to, I looked at Diane. This woman cancelled 70% of my scheduled visits. She removed my phone number from Jaylen's contacts. She threw away his mother's necklace, the only thing he had left of Grace. She told a 13-year-old boy that his dead mother was weak. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. A man whispered, "Oh my God." Diane snapped, "That is not true. She's lying." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. Inside were printed text messages, the school counselor's documented notes, and a copy of the benefits application Diane had filed using Jaylen as a dependent while spending the money on herself. I held the folder up and said, "Every word I just said is documented. The school counselor has records, the text messages are time-stamped, and the state financial records show exactly where the money went." Diane's face went white. She turned to Marcus and hissed, "Say something." Marcus stood up slowly. Every eye turned to him, and for a moment I thought he might defend her. I braced myself, but Marcus looked at Jaylen, and Jaylen looked back at his father with eyes that were not angry, just tired. The kind of tired a child should never carry. Marcus's voice cracked. "She's telling the truth." The room erupted. People whispered, pointed, shook their heads. Diane grabbed Marcus's arm. "What are you doing?" Marcus pulled his arm free. "I should have done this a long time ago." He looked at me. "Miss Patterson, I'm sorry. I knew what was happening. I was too scared of Diane to stop it." Diane's composed mask shattered. She pointed at me and shouted, "You don't get to come in here and ruin everything I built." I looked at her steadily. "You didn't build anything. You took a boy who was already built and tried to tear him down." Then a voice came from the front row, quiet at first, then stronger. Jaylen stood up. His cap was slightly crooked, his gown was too long, but he stood straight. "Grandma didn't give up on me," he said. His voice shook, but it carried. "She called every week, even when Diane deleted her number. She wrote me letters, even when Diane threw them away. I found some of them in the trash, and I kept them hidden under my mattress." He reached into his gown pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased from being read 100 times. "This is from my grandma. She wrote it when I was 10. It says, 'Baby, no matter how far apart we are, you are my heart walking around in the world. Your mama is watching and she is so proud.'" 300 people in that auditorium went silent. Then a woman in the middle section started clapping. Then another. Then the whole room. Diane looked around like the walls were closing in. She grabbed her purse and tried to walk out, but the principal stepped forward and said, "Ma'am, I think you should stay. The school counselor has requested a meeting with you and Mr. Patterson before anyone leaves today." Diane froze. Marcus sat down heavily, his head in his hands. The principal looked at me and said, "Miss Patterson, would you like to finish the family remarks?" I looked at Jaylen. He nodded, his eyes wet but shining. I stepped to the microphone. "I am not here to make a speech. I am here because my grandson graduated top of his class, And he did that not because of anyone standing in this room. He did that because his mother, Grace, taught him to be kind and strong before she left this world. He did that because even when people tried to erase where he came from, he held on to who he was. I looked at Jaylen. Baby, your mama would be so proud of you today. And I am so proud of you. Not because of your grades, but because you never stopped being the boy she raised. You never let them change your heart. Jaylen walked to me and wrapped his arms around me. He was taller than me now. His chin rested on top of my head. And for the first time in years, he cried freely, not hiding it, not ashamed. After the ceremony, things moved quickly. The school counselor met with Marcus, Diane, and a representative from Child Services who had already been contacted due to the financial irregularities. Diane was asked to provide documentation for every benefit she had claimed in Jaylen's name. She could not. Marcus, to his credit, did not hide anymore. He gave a full statement. He admitted that Diane had controlled the household, that she had systematically cut off my access to Jaylen, and that he had allowed it because he was afraid of confrontation. Within a month, the court revisited the custody arrangement. Patricia, my lawyer, presented everything. The counselor's records, Jaylen's testimony, the cancelled visits, the financial fraud. The judge listened carefully. This time, the ruling went the other way. Jaylen was placed with me. Marcus was granted supervised visits, the same arrangement I had been forced to endure for 8 years. Diane faced separate charges for the benefits fraud. I do not know exactly what happened to her in court because by that point, I had stopped paying attention to her. She had taken enough of my time. The day Jaylen moved back into my house in Decatur, he walked through the front door carrying the same suitcase he had left with 8 years before. He stood in the hallway and looked around. The walls were the same. The faucet still dripped. His old room still had dinosaur stickers on the door because I had never taken them down. He turned to me and said, "It smells the same." I said, "That's because home doesn't change, baby. It waits." He set down his suitcase and hugged me. And this time, his body was relaxed. No tension, no fear. Just a boy, almost a man, standing in the place where he was always loved. That fall, Jaylen started high school. He joined the debate team. He made honor roll every semester. He started volunteering at the local library, reading to little kids the same way he used to read to Grace. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sun go down, the same porch where he used to draw dinosaurs with sidewalk chalk. He said, "Grandma, why didn't you give up? All those years, all those drives, all that money you didn't have. Why?" I looked at him and said, "Because your mama asked me to take care of you, and a promise to your child doesn't expire." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I want to be a lawyer. I want to help kids who can't fight for themselves." My eyes filled with tears, the good kind, the kind that come when you realize all the pain was building toward something. I said, "Then you do that, baby. And when you stand in that courtroom, you remember what it feels like to be the one nobody listens to, because that is what will make you different." Jaylen smiled. It was Grace's smile, the same one that used to light up a room and make strangers feel welcome. And in that moment, sitting on that old porch with the dripping faucet and the cracked steps, I knew something with absolute certainty. The best revenge was not yelling in an auditorium. The best revenge was not winning a court case. The best revenge was this: a boy who was told he was nothing, sitting on a porch with the woman who never stopped believing he was everything. Diane tried to erase Grace from Jaylen's life, but Grace was in his smile, in his kindness, in his stubborn refusal to become bitter. They tried to break us. They tried to separate us. They tried to rewrite our story. But you cannot erase love that is written in bone. You can delay it. You can hide it. You can throw it in the trash and pretend it never existed. But it comes back. It always comes back. And we were proof.